Jason was stunned when he received a letter from the HOA demanding he tear down the treehouse he'd built for his kids. Karen Montgomery, the HOA president, claimed it violated rules that Jason never knew existed. Her smug, authoritative tone made it clear she believed she was untouchable. What Karen didn't know was that Jason wasn't the kind of guy to back down. He had a secret weapon, a lawyer who could expose the HOA's corruption and manipulations. Soon, Karen would learn that messing with Jason would be her biggest mistake. But let's start from the beginning. Jason and his wife Emma had been living in their suburban home for nearly a decade. Their backyard, lined with tall trees and the occasional swing set, was a sanctuary, a place for their two young children to play freely. But one Sunday afternoon, their peaceful life was shattered. The HOA president, Karen Montgomery, came marching to their front door with a clipboard in hand and an expression that could freeze the sun. "Your treehouse violates HOA regulations," she announced, without even a greeting. "It's not in compliance with our guidelines. I'm giving you 30 days to tear it down or we'll impose a hefty fine." Jason blinked, stunned by the sudden aggression. The treehouse, a labor of love built by him and his kids, had been a part of their home since they moved in. It stood strong, nestled among the branches of an old oak tree. The children spent hours there every day, their laughter echoing in the yard. To have it suddenly threatened felt like an attack on their very right to enjoy their property. Karen, a woman in her late 40s with sharp features and a no-nonsense attitude, was notorious in the neighborhood for her overbearing control. Her perfectly tailored suit and the look of self-importance made it clear she thought she had the power to dictate everyone's life in the community. She didn't seem to care about Jason's family or the memories tied to the treehouse. She was on a mission to assert her dominance. Jason stood firm, refusing to back down. "You can't just tell me to destroy something on my property," he said, trying to keep his voice calm, despite the anger brewing inside. Karen only smiled smugly, scribbling something on her clipboard. "Either you comply or we'll take it to court. The HOA doesn't tolerate violations, and I will ensure you pay for this." Jason spent the next few days researching, gathering every possible document to defend his case. He had no idea what he was up against. Karen had an entire team behind her, the HOA board, local lawyers, and even the support of other neighbors who often sided with her. As the deadline loomed, Jason's frustration grew. He reached out to a lawyer, Mark Taylor, who had represented a few neighbors in the past. Mark quickly reviewed the HOA rules and the documents Jason had gathered. The more they dug, the clearer it became. Karen's demands were built on shaky grounds, and the HOA's regulations were vague at best. But Karen wasn't going to let Jason off that easily. She escalated the pressure, sending him threatening letters and even going so far as to call the city's zoning department to claim the treehouse violated building codes. Her manipulations were becoming more brazen, and Jason knew it was time to take action. He wasn't going to let this petty tyrant win. As tensions rose, Jason reached out to his neighbors for support. Surprisingly, several of them, fed up with Karen's overreach, agreed to back him up. One neighbor, Linda, had also faced Karen's wrath over her front yard decoration and was more than willing to testify. Others, like Steve and Rachel, had witnessed Karen's power-hungry tactics for years. Together, they compiled their evidence, including a letter from a building inspector who confirmed that the treehouse was well within safety regulations and didn't violate any actual laws. This was no longer just about a treehouse. It was about standing up to an abusive system. On the day the HOA called an official hearing, the neighborhood was on edge. Jason, with his legal team by his side, entered the crowded community center, facing Karen and the HOA board. The room buzzed with nervous energy as residents filled the seats, watching the showdown unfold. Karen was seated at the front, her icy demeanor never faltering. Jason could see the disdain in her eyes as she looked down her nose at him. "This is a clear violation," Karen said, her voice cutting through the air. "Jason Turner has been given ample time to comply, and yet he refuses. The HOA cannot allow such defiance." The tension in the room grew unbearable as Jason's lawyer, Mark, stood to present their case. He methodically tore apart Karen's claims, exposing her overreach and the weak legal standing of her accusations. Each point they made seemed to chip away at Karen's control, and Jason could see her growing more agitated. "Your Honor, I've done nothing but build a safe and joyful space for my children. I've followed every rule that matters," Jason declared, his voice steady but charged with emotion. "What Karen is doing is bullying, plain and simple. She's abusing her position to force her will on others." The room fell silent, the truth hanging heavy in the air. Jason could feel a shift, as many of the neighbors who had once stood by Karen now seemed to waver in their support. Her facade of control was cracking, and they could see it for what it was: an overreach that had gone unchecked for too long. In the days following the hearing, Jason and his neighbors eagerly awaited the decision. When the ruling finally came in, it was nothing short of a victory. The judge sided with Jason, ruling that the HOA had no legal grounds to demand the removal of his treehouse. Furthermore, Karen was ordered to pay for court fees, and the HOA board was forced to reevaluate its policies regarding personal property rights. But the victory didn't stop there. The pressure from the legal battle and the overwhelming support from the community forced the HOA to reform its governing structure. Karen, humiliated by the outcome, was removed from her position as president, and new, more reasonable members were elected. As Jason stood in his backyard, watching his kids play in the treehouse, he felt a profound sense of pride. Not only had he saved his family's cherished space, but he had also stood up for what was right. The fight wasn't just about a treehouse. It was about fighting for freedom, justice, and the right to live without fear of abuse from those in power. And as the sun set behind the treehouse, Jason knew that this victory wasn't just his. It belonged to the whole neighborhood.